It's one of those nights. Your room is quiet, but your mind isn't. You've tried everything. The soft music, the deep breathing, the ritual of winding down, but still you're wide awake. Your thoughts move in circles, not loud, but persistent. A memory here, a worry there, a quiet ache you don't talk about during the day but can't quite push away in the dark. Maybe you're tired of holding it all together. Maybe you're grieving. Maybe you're just exhausted from a world that keeps asking for more than you have to give. Whatever it is, it's okay. You've made it this far. You're here, and you're allowed to rest. So let's go somewhere ancient, somewhere golden and silent and full of stories buried in sand. Let's return to Egypt, but not the version with just kings and pyramids. Let's visit a quieter chapter, one with women who ruled from behind veils, and sometimes from thrones. Let's talk about the forgotten female pharaohs. You open your eyes. The air is warm, dry, and still the kind of heat that feels like it's been holding its breath for centuries. You're standing in a vast stone hall, columns carved with lotus blossoms stretching toward the sky. Dust floats in golden beams of light. Somewhere nearby, water drips, slow and steady. Time feels thick, and she stands before you, crowned, calm, entirely unbothered by whether history would remember her. Her name may be lost or mispronounced or written in symbols no one thought to decode, but she ruled, not beside a man, not in the shadow of a king, as Pharaoh, the one who wore the false beard, the one who sat on the lion-shaped throne, the one who signed decrees, led armies, praised gods, and punished enemies, all while wrapped in linen and power. You watch her lift her hand, not in greeting, in command. And it's clear, no one questions her, not the priests, not the generals, not even time itself. She was real. Even if the textbooks forgot her name, even if her image was scratched off stone, even if later rulers tried to pretend she had never existed, but sand remembers, and stone remembers, and tonight we remember. Her name might have been Sobek Neferu, or Tausret, or Hatshepsut, though even she was called king to make her power more acceptable, because womanhood and authority were often seen as opposites. But she didn't care. She ruled anyway. And though most monuments honored men, she carved her legacy into cliffs, into temples, into the hush between river winds. If this story, this slow remembering, is helping you soften inside, you're welcome to like or subscribe. Only if it eases your breath. Only if it helps. No pressure, no noise, just stillness. So, tell me, where are you right now? Curled on your side, one arm tucked under your cheek, sitting cross-legged, in bed, listening with tired eyes and a heart full of questions wrapped in a blanket like armor. However you are, you're enough. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to be bold or brave or better. You just need a place to rest. A place where forgotten queens still walk through dust and light-wearing crowns made of stories. Tonight we'll walk with them, past statues that were buried, through halls where incense once burned, to remember the women who ruled even when the world tried to erase their names. Let's begin. Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into the silent sands of the Nile, past half-collapsed columns, and beneath the cool shadow of a forgotten obelisk. You pass the sleeping crocodiles and the drifting papyrus brushing aside gold-flaked cobwebs as you step into a tomb no one has dared enter in centuries. The torches flicker, but you're not afraid. This isn't a horror story. It's just history. Quiet, dusty, misremembered history. You kneel beside a stone sarcophagus. The lid is heavy, but someone has already cracked it open. Not grave robbers, just time. Inside, the wrappings are crumbled, but you can still see the faint trace of a royal scepter. And beside it, a name carved in both hieroglyphs and haste. A name no one taught you in school. A name that belonged to a woman who ruled as Pharaoh. You probably won't survive this. Not because you're cursed, but because once you start digging into the lives of Egypt's forgotten female pharaohs, you'll realize just how much we were never told. How many names got scrubbed off monuments? How many statues were defaced? How many thrones were shared or stolen by women who refused to sit in the background? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You brush more sand aside. Your fingers trace a carving, 2 cartouches, the frames reserved for royalty. Inside both, the same name. That's rare. 1 cartouche was enough for most. 2 meant serious power, and the figure kneeling beside the name, not a king, a woman, arms raised in the posture of command, dressed in fine linen, wig braided, and behind her the tall, unmistakable symbol of Ma'at, truth and balance. You weren't expecting that. No one tells you there were women pharaohs. They tell you about Cleopatra, always Cleopatra, and usually not even the real one. But Sobek Neferu, Mernith, Hatshepsut, Tawosret. Most people never hear those names unless they fall deep down a history rabbit hole. You just fell into one, and it's dark, but also kind of beautiful. Let's start here. Ancient Egypt lasted over 3,000 years. That's more than the time between Julius Caesar and us. During that time, dozens of dynasties rose and fell with kings and queens, floods and famines, conquests and curses. But the position of Pharaoh was technically divine. A pharaoh wasn't just a ruler. They were the living embodiment of Horus, the falcon god. And upon death, they became Osiris, the god of the dead. Now here's the awkward bit. Horus is male. Osiris, also male. And Egypt was in many ways a patriarchy. Land power titles all passed through male lines. So when a woman stepped into the role of pharaoh, it wasn't just a scandal. It was a theological crisis. that didn't stop them. They just adapted the system. Mainstream historical fact. Some women ruled as pharaohs by simply assuming male regalia, false beards, male pronouns, in inscriptions and traditional iconography. They didn't erase their womanhood entirely, but they made themselves fit into a very rigid, divine mold. You peer deeper into the tomb. A shattered vase shows a depiction of Hatshepsut, not just wearing the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, but flanked by male gods offering her blessings. It's propaganda, but also it's poetry. And here comes your first quirky tidbit. There's evidence that some statues of these female rulers had interchangeable features, removable heads, or adjustable names so future kings could literally swap out the woman's image with their own. Modular monuments, like ancient Lego sets, with a side of political insecurity. You pick up a flake of paint. It's blue, that rich lapis-colored blue they made from crushed stone and searing fire, only used for sacred things, which means this wasn't just a side queen. This was someone worshipped, someone feared, someone erased. You sit back on your heels. There's a silence in tombs that doesn't exist anywhere else. It's not just the lack of sound, it's the density of stillness. Every inch of wall, every crack in the stone feels like it's watching you, holding breath. It doesn't need any more. And that's when you see it. A mural on the far wall, half buried in debris. It shows a line of rulers, some familiar Ramses Akhenaten, even a child-sized Tutankhamun. But in the middle, bold and large, there's a figure seated on the throne. Female, crowned, surrounded by advisors and dancers and incense burners. No name, just the outline. Someone scraped the name off. Historians still argue whether these acts of erasure were driven by sexism, dynastic rivalry, or theological panic. Some say later kings didn't want the precedent of powerful women lingering on the walls. Others think the priesthood had a hand in rewriting history to fit a more divine narrative. But the paint tells a different story. So do the Shabti figurines you find stacked in the corner. Tiny servants meant to serve the dead in the afterlife. Their faces are worn, but their poses are identical kneeling tools, in hand, ready to work. You imagine her sitting here, scepter in hand, not smiling, ruling. And then you notice the smallest detail, a child's footprint in dried mud pressed into the corner of a tile half hidden by dust. Maybe her son, a servant's child. Or maybe, just maybe, she was once a child here too. Someone who ran through the palace before she ruled it. You exhale slowly. You're not here to rewrite her history. You're just here to remember. You wake up to the Nile breathing. Not in a poetic sense, though. Yes, it's beautiful. But in the very literal, heavy fog kind of way. The river exhales mist across the marshes, curling over papyrus stalks, and drifting between mud brick houses like a ghost looking for breakfast. The ground is damp, your linen is clammy, and somewhere a frog is being far too enthusiastic about the dawn. You stretch bones creaking in a way that makes you feel very unpharaonic and step barefoot into the world of a girl who by all logic should have been forgotten, but wasn't. She's small, maybe 8. Her name's lost, but the records tell us she was born to privilege. Maybe not royal, not yet, but close enough to touch the hem of it. Her father's important, her mother's respected. She has access to things most children don't: scribes, tutors, talismans, clean water. She learns to write her name in hieroglyphs before she loses her baby teeth. She learns the names of the gods before she learns to cook barley. And she's clever. Mainstream historical fact: upper-class girls in ancient Egypt could receive formal education, especially those connected to temples. Literacy wasn't strictly male territory. Girls trained as priestesses, musicians, even doctors. And for royal daughters, education was power. You watch her hold a reed pen with 2 hands, tongue peeking from the corner of her mouth as she copies the Eye of Horus over and over again on a broken potsherd. Not because she's told to, but because she wants to get it right. One eye slightly crooked still counts. Her tutor, a man with ink-stained fingers and the air of someone who's given up on perfect students, nods. She grins. You grin too. Across the courtyard, other girls are weaving, grinding grain, learning the more expected arts of womanhood. This one doesn't care. She wants scrolls, not dough. Gods, not gossip. You follow her down the temple corridor, her sandals slapping softly against polished stone. She's not supposed to be here. These halls are for boys and priests and grown men with titles long enough to trip over. But she slips through like smoke, and then you see it. The shrine, small but glinting in the half-light. Statues of Hathor and Isis smiling serenely. Offerings placed carefully. Honey bread, 2 lotus blossoms, and a figurine carved from ivory. The girl kneels, not just to pray, but to study. Her lips move silently, repeating prayers not meant for children. Not because she wants favors, because she wants to understand. Quirky tidbit. In some temple schools, students would memorize entire myth cycles by heart, including all the weird, awkward bits, like how Isis tricked Ra into telling her his secret name by poisoning him. Very girl boss of her. You wonder what myths this girl likes best. Maybe the ones where the women win. You trail her into the courtyard again, and she's already plotting. Not like a villain, like a child who's seen just enough of the world to know how to outsmart it. She asks pointed questions. She watches which priest gets more offerings. She listens to how names are spoken in different tones. She's learning the system, not to obey it, but to shape it. Historians still argue whether female rulers like Hatshepsut and Sobekneferu were trained from girlhood for power, or if their rise came only after the chaos of male heirs dying young. But here's the truth. Power never comes to you clean. You take it with sand in your shoes and hesitation in your stomach. You watch her glance at a passing royal bark, gleaming with gold and guarded by soldiers, a pharaoh inside maybe, or just his cousin. Either way, she stares like she's memorizing the way the sun hits the crown, not in envy, in preparation. Later, you find her in the shade of a fig tree. She's talking to a servant girl, probably a few years older, but with the worn hands and bent back of someone who doesn't get scrolls. The two sit cross-legged, sharing a bowl of dates. It's not charity, it's friendship, and maybe strategy. The servant girl laughs and mimics a priest's self-important swagger. The noble girl nearly chokes on a date. You can tell they'll remember each other. You'll see that servant again, not in this section, but soon. Evening falls. The frogs are louder now. The heat lifts a little, and incense from the temple drifts through the garden in lazy spirals. She's back with her tutor, squinting at an astronomical chart etched into a wall. Her fingers trace the shapes, Orion, Sirius, the cycles of the moon. She frowns at something, tilts her head, corrects a mistake in the drawing. The tutor doesn't argue. You see something shift in his face. Respect. And just like that, a new star joins the sky. It's morning again, but the air feels different now. Not the cool mist of early Nile fog, but the kind of dry heat that arrives with intention, already pressing against the stone walls before the sun even crests the horizon. You stretch your limbs, roll your neck, and realize that today you're someone else entirely. Someone older, taller, still her. The same girl from before now, maybe 16, maybe 17, still sharp-eyed, still moving, like she belongs where others say she shouldn't. Except now, people nod when she walks by. Servants whisper her name. Scribes lower their eyes. A few priests call her daughter, but not like a father would, like a priest calls a deity's chosen child. Today's the day you put on the wig, not just any wig, the ceremonial one. Layers of black curls, scented with lotus oil, and beeswax heavy enough to make your neck ache. Your nurse clips it into place while murmuring a blessing under her breath, hands trembling only slightly. You peer into a polished bronze mirror. The reflection looking back is someone you'd almost bow to. Mainstream historical fact: royal women in ancient Egypt often wore intricate wigs during public ceremonies, symbols of status and ritual purity. Some were made with human hair, others with plant fibers, lacquered into shape and perfumed with myrrh or cinnamon. They weren't just fashion. They were a kind of armor. You add the kohl, thick dramatic lines stretching from the corners of your eyes like the wings of a hawk, not just for beauty, though it helps, but for protection against sun spirits and anyone who dares underestimate you. You step into the temple courtyard and feel the shift immediately. No more scurrying children, no more leaning into corners to overhear conversations. Today you're the conversation. You're not Pharaoh yet, but people have started to say your name after sunset when the air cools and secrets drift more easily. Some say you're just a placeholder. Others say the gods favor you. A few say both. And you smile politely and remember everything. Today, you perform a ritual, not for the gods, for the court. You kneel before a sacred statue, maybe Hathor, goddess of joy and motherhood, or maybe Sekhmet, lioness of war. They both suit you. The priests chant, waving censers, thick with burning resin. You say the words you've memorized since childhood, even the ones you still don't fully understand. You press your hand to the idol's feet. The floor is cool. Your hand is warm. The stone doesn't respond, but the people watching do. You stand, and somewhere behind you, a courtier lowers their head just a little slower than before. Quirky tidbit. In some cases, royal women gained public prestige by taking on religious titles like God's wife of Amun. This wasn't just honorary. It gave them land wealth and influence over temple politics. Basically, you got divine legitimacy and a budget. You change into lighter linen. The ceremony's over, and now it's time for real work. You step into a shaded colonnade where elders of the court await. Men in crisp white kilts, silver-bearded and sunburnt, their sandals worn thin from decades of pacing these stones. They speak slowly, testing your reactions. One mentions trade disruptions in Nubia. You ask about river routes. Another mutters about grain shortages. You ask for the storage records. One coughs and dares to bring up marriage. You smile. Say nothing. Just let the silence do the heavy lifting. Historians still argue whether young noblewomen had real political agency before officially ascending to the throne, or whether they were simply figureheads manipulated by powerful men. But here now the glances you earn are less about ornament and more about calculation. You're being measured, and they're coming up short. Evening falls, the stone cools again, and with it comes the whisper of fabric against skin. You walk through the palace garden with someone you trust, your old servant friend, now a lady in waiting. She's taller, sharper too. She hands you a date stuffed with nuts. You chew thoughtfully. She asks if you're scared. You say no. She knows better. That night you dream of the throne, not as gold or glory, as responsibility, as silence, as solitude. In the dream, you're seated between two gods and neither one speaks. You realize you're supposed to speak first, but you don't yet know what to say. You don't remember the exact moment the world shifted, but it has. There's a difference in how people stand when you enter a room, a stiffness in their shoulders, a stillness in their hands. They bow just a little too long. Their eyes dart toward one another. Something's happened. You're not told right away, of course. That's not how things work here. First come the rituals, then the announcements, then the rumors. Only after the ceremonies does truth catch up. But you already know. He's dead. The Pharaoh, the man who wore both crowns, who commanded armies, who looked at you like a clever little niece, or sometimes like a convenient chess piece. Your father, your uncle, your husband. It's always complicated. Royal lines in Egypt aren't straight. They curve, twist, loop. The gods don't mind, apparently. Neither do the priests, so long as the incense keeps burning and the offerings stay fresh. Mainstream historical fact: royal succession in ancient Egypt often involved sibling marriages, especially among ruling families. This wasn't just about keeping bloodlines pure. It was about consolidating power. Land temples thrown all in one family tree, which, to be honest, looked more like a wreath. You're dressed in mourning linen now, white, loose. The wig is gone. So is the coal. Your face is bare and your eyes are sharp. You kneel beside the body, not embalmed, yet not fully cooled. The air smells like cedar oil, frankincense, and something beneath all that you try not to name. The priest recites verses. You mouth them automatically. Your hand rests on the edge of the bier, not trembling, not clenched, just waiting. Someone weeps behind you. You don't turn around. Because here's the secret: you're not mourning a man. You're mourning what he took with him, the thin veil of protection between you and everything sharp in the court. The old man was a wall. Now you're exposed. And that's when the silence ends. Long live the king, someone says. Only there is no king. Not yet. Quirky tidbit: in some funerary ceremonies, the new ruler had to symbolically wake the dead pharaoh before assuming the throne. An eerie little rite where you whispered the successor's name into a corpse's ear. Talk about awkward job interviews. You don't whisper anything, not yet. You retreat to your chamber that night and sit cross-legged on the cool floor. A clay oil lamp flickers beside you. The shadows on the wall look like gods or demons, or maybe just yourself multiplied. You breathe slowly. Outside, the city stirs, not with grief, but with curiosity. Will she rule? Can she? Should she? Historians still argue whether certain female pharaohs came to power by political genius, divine right, or sheer accident of circumstance. But none of them just fell into it. They chose, or were forced to choose, and choosing meant risking everything. The next morning, you are summoned, not asked, summoned, to the Hall of Judgment. Not the one for the dead that's the afterlife's problem. This one is filled with the living, and they're far more dangerous. You walk barefoot down a columned corridor. Your feet slap softly. Your heart is louder. There are maybe 40 people in the hall, all of them powerful, none of them smiling. You stand in the center. A priest asks you, "Are you willing?" A scribe asks you, "Are you able?" A general asks, "Do you dare?" You don't answer them. You answer the gods. You raise your arms, just as you did when you were 8, and mimicking prayer with sticky hands and crooked ink. Only now your arms are steady. I am the daughter of the Nile, you say. I am the voice of Me'at, the hand of Sekhmet, the eye of Ra. I accept the burden. You don't say, "I want to rule." You say, "I will carry," because ruling here is not about crowns and gold. It's about weight, and you're strong enough now. Later that evening, as the sun stains the horizon with honey and rust, a small ceremony is held. Quiet, private, just a few key figures. A scribal record is etched into a tablet, your name, your titles, your lineage. The first cartouche is drawn, and then they draw a second one. That's the moment. It's real. Pharaohs are marked with two names, a throne name and a birth name, both encircled in ovals, both carved into stone, both offered to the gods. For men, this was routine. For you, historic and deeply unsettling. You step outside after the scribe finishes his work, heart thudding with each step. The stars are out, bright, scattered across the black like someone spilled powdered silver across the sky. You whisper your new name once, softly. It feels strange in your mouth, but not untrue. The next morning is quiet, but not in a peaceful way. It's the kind of quiet that comes before something breaks. A pause in a song, just long enough to feel awkward. You wake not to bird song or temple bells, but to a kind of stillness that makes you hesitate before moving. You lie on your back in a room that no longer belongs to a princess or a priestess or even a daughter. You are Pharaoh now. And suddenly everything is a test. The first is simple: get dressed. But of course, nothing is simple anymore. You're no longer allowed to choose your own linen. There are regulations now. Colors, symbols, materials. You can't just wear white, you have to wear the white. The sacred white of Upper Egypt. The crown of vulture and cobra. The anointed kilt, which no one ever mentions, is incredibly itchy. Mainstream historical fact: pharaohs were dressed and adorned by special attendants, sometimes as many as 5 or 6 at once, each responsible for a different piece of the regalia. And, yes, that included women rulers, Hatshepsut included. Think glam squad, but divine. You stand arms raised slightly as a team of women work in silence around you. They speak only in murmurs. One binds your wrists in golden cuffs, etched with lotus and papyrus. Another places the beaded collar across your shoulders, so heavy it presses your collarbones into submission. And then comes the headdress. Not the wig, not anymore. The Neem's striped linen pleated just so, banded in lapis blue and sun gold, falling past your shoulders like river water frozen mid-flow. It's too large. They all are. Designed for men. Built for men. Worn by men. You wear it anyway. Because this isn't about fit. It's about claiming space. Next, test the court. You enter with practiced steps, keeping your heels exactly a hand's width apart, just like your tutor taught you. The hall is already full. Nobles, scribes, ambassadors, even a few foreign traders lurking near the pillars, pretending not to watch you. They rise when you enter. All of them. That part's nice. The vizier begins the formal greetings. Titles are listed. ancestors invoked. The gods are thanked, and everyone pretends to believe the gods had any say in this. You sit, not on a throne, not yet, on a ceremonial seat beside it, like you're warming up the limestone. They begin with petitions. The grain tax is too high. The fishermen in Memphis are protesting. A shipment of incense from Punt has gone missing. Someone thinks a cat is possessed by a spirit and wants temple approval for an exorcism. That one you keep for later. Sounds interesting. You nod. Ask questions. Pretend to take notes. Let your eyes drift across the room to see who's sweating. Quirky tidbit. In some court records, petitions to female rulers include bizarre requests, approval to move a boundary stone, complaints about bad dreams, even requests for healing rituals after being bitten by scorpions. Pharaohs were divine judges, sure, but also part therapist, part mom, part magical hotline. You handle it, at least outwardly. Inside, you're still catching up to the truth. Your word isn't just important now. It's final. There's no one else coming. You are the top of the system. And the system has very sharp corners. Historians still argue whether women pharaohs ruled entirely alone or had to rely on male co-regents behind the scenes. But regardless of who stood next to them, the eyes of the gods and the eyes of the court were fixed squarely on them. After court, you're finally allowed to breathe. You retreat to a garden balcony. The sun is harsh, but the shade is soft and smells like date palm and jasmine. A servant brings you pomegranate juice. It's too warm. You drink it anyway. Then a knock. It's your old friend again, your lady in waiting. Still the only one who doesn't flinch when you sigh. She leans beside you against the balcony rail, says nothing for a long time. Then she asks, "Do you think they'll ever say your name in stone?" You don't answer right away because you're not sure. That night you wander the temple corridors alone. You're not supposed to. Pharaohs are meant to be guarded at all times, but you slip away old habits. You walk past the statues of gods, past murals of battles you've memorized, past a pool filled with sacred lotus blooms, floating like fragments of moonlight. You pause in front of a wall, engraving. It's old, weathered, depicts a woman with a flail in one hand and a scepter in the other. Her name is barely legible. You reach out, trace the glyphs. She ruled once. She was here. She stood like you're standing now. And yet, time has almost erased her. You press your palm against the stone and whisper, "Not this time." By the time the sun breaks the edge of the eastern hills, you've already been awake for hours. You've memorized the sequence of rituals now, because that's what power in Egypt is, ritual stacked upon ritual form, wrapped around function until they blur together. Every morning begins not with plans, but with incense. You walk the sacred path alone, past guards, pretending not to watch, past servants who drop to their knees as you pass and into the temple's heart. There, waiting in a gilded alcove, is a god, or at least the statue of one. Amun-Ra today, though yesterday it was Horus, and tomorrow it might be Thoth. You stand before the carved face lips, parted slightly as the priest anoints the god's feet with oil. You offer the bread, you wave the fan, you whisper the names of the day. You're not praying, you're being watched. Mainstream historical fact. Pharaohs were considered intermediaries between the gods and the people, especially during daily rituals like the opening of the mouth ceremony or the morning offering rites. But many of these acts were less about belief and more about maintaining cosmic order, Ma'at, the great balance. You perform each movement with exactitude, not because you believe Amun needs bread, but because they believe you must feed him. You leave the temple with a faint ache behind your eyes. The air outside is brighter now, already sharpening into heat. A breeze from the river brings the smell of fish silt and boat wax. Somewhere a flute is playing. And then your next meeting begins. Today it's with the generals. They arrive in sandals, dusted with travel eyes, still stung with sand from the desert. They kneel, salute, rise only when you nod. You remember their names from the scrolls: Meru, the loyal one; Jed, the practical one; and Hariat, the ambitious one. They speak of Nubia again. Tensions at the southern border, caravan raids, and rumors, always rumors of mercenaries plotting uprisings near the mines. You listen carefully. You ask about the river. That catches them off guard. The river, Meru repeats. Yes, you say, if we can't control the river, we can't control the South. Quirky tidbit. Some military campaigns under female rulers focused more on economic control, like securing trade routes along the Nile and Red Sea, than open war. Grain water incense and turquoise were just as valuable as victory. They shift on their feet, suddenly more attentive. You ask them for maps, not battle maps, supply maps. That earns respect and a little fear. After the meeting, you pause alone beside the papyrus basin in the courtyard. A breeze ripples the surface, and your reflection stares back gold linen paint posture, but your eyes are still your own. Historians still argue whether female rulers in ancient Egypt had full command of the military, or whether they delegated to male advisors and generals. Some say it was ceremonial. Others point to inscriptions showing queens leading armies. Either way, command is performance, and you've learned to play the part. Later that afternoon, a sculptor visits. He brings sketches. The first is flattering slim face, regal posture, arms crossed with crook and flail. The second is bolder, bare-chested, false beard, seated like a lion. And the third is quiet eyes, lowered, crown tilted at one hand extended, in offering. You choose the second. The court will whisper. But let them whisper. You're not here to make them comfortable. You're here to be remembered. The sculptor bows and leaves with instructions. Your lady-in-waiting enters. She's holding a letter from the north. You take it. Unroll it. Scan it. Your stomach tightens. A proposal, not of trade, not of alliance. Marriage. The sender is a prince, royal blood, land-rich, temple-connected. A smart choice, politically. But smart doesn't mean safe, nor does it mean yours. You don't answer the letter. Not yet. Instead, you walk to the archives, deep inside the palace where the air is dry and dust smells like time. You ask the scribes for old scrolls, queens who ruled alone, pharaohs without consorts. Exceptions to the pattern. They bring out three, only three. One scroll is incomplete, one is heavily redacted, one is missing entirely. You stare at the gaps. This is what forgetting looks like. You run a finger down the margins. The ink flakes slightly under your touch. You wonder if someone like you once touched this page too. Not with reverence, with desperation. You leave the scrolls untouched. That night you host a banquet. Small, strategic. The temple priests, the tax ministers, the port overseers, and one foreign emissary from the east who says all the right things while watching your every blink. You sip wine slowly. Let your silence say more than your speech. By the end of the evening, they're laughing a little too loudly, trying a little too hard. One slips up and calls you girl. You raise your cup, smile, and say, I'm flattered. But girls don't wear crowns. The morning after the banquet arrives slowly, with aching shoulders and too many words still echoing in your head. You didn't drink that much wine. You didn't even eat that much. But political theater, it turns out, is just as exhausting as battle. And last night you fought 10 silent wars with 10 different men without ever raising your voice. The palace is quiet again. That early hush when even the statues seem drowsy. You rise alone without attendants and step out onto the roof terrace before sunrise. It's still dark, but the edge of the sky is softening, a pale indigo giving way to peach. The Nile below glimmers faintly, already alive with boats sliding through the water like lazy insects. You stretch your arms. Your back cracks. Pharaohs aren't supposed to make that sound. But you're human. You remind yourself that sometimes being divine is a role, not a state of being. The day begins again with ritual, oil, prayer, offerings. You do them not because they bring you peace, but because they buy you time. As long as you maintain order, Mahat, the wheels of state keep turning, and no one questions your crown. Yet, mainstream historical fact, female pharaohs, especially those who ruled alone, often leaned heavily into divine symbolism to secure their authority. They presented themselves as manifestations of multiple gods, combining male and female traits to signal balance, legitimacy, and power beyond mere politics. And so today, you invoke both Hathor and Horus, the nurturer and the avenger. You place the headdress with care. The false beard, stiff and strange, tightens against your chin. Another mask for another stage. Later in the day, the temple scribes arrive. They bring petitions, dozens. Farmers asking for debt forgiveness after a failed flood. Builders requesting additional rations for workers. A woman pleading for justice after her husband sold her dowry and vanished into the delta. You read every one, and then you do something unexpected. You respond, one by one, out loud. To the scribe's horror, you begin dictating personal answers, not just standard approvals. You ask for the name of the woman's village. You suggest a new measurement of grain compensation based on region. You even request an inspection of a crumbling canal wall said to be causing flooding near the workers' housing. Quirky tidbit. In some surviving records, especially ostraca pottery shards used for notes, there are direct replies from rulers, including short, oddly emotional ones. One even reads, "Tell her I have not forgotten her tears." You don't write that, but you think it. The scribes scribble in silence, too stunned to interrupt. Historians still argue whether this kind of direct involvement from rulers was routine or extraordinary, especially for women. Some say it was staged a performance of compassion. Others say it was genuine a ruler's attempt to remain grounded in the lives of the people. You suspect the truth lies somewhere in between. By mid-afternoon, the letters are sealed. You step out to the garden again. The breeze has shifted, coming from the west, now hot and dry, bringing with it the smell of sand resin and distant wood smoke. Someone is burning offerings upriver. You can almost taste the ash on your tongue. Then comes a visitor, not scheduled, not summoned. A boy no older than 12, barefoot and breathing hard, escorted by 2 guards who look only mildly annoyed. He carries a bundle, wrapped in reed matting bound with colored string. He drops to his knees and offers it up without a word. You nod. He unwraps it. Inside a clay figurine, roughly made, of a woman in a headdress, holding a staff. The likeness is optimistic, but you know who it's meant to be. You. I made this, he says, so the gods would know you. You blink. That's not the kind of thing you prepare for. You kneel slowly, take the figurine. It's warm from his hands and slightly crooked but solid, real. Thank you, you say. And for once, the words don't feel like a performance. He nods, scratches his nose, then blurts, "Are you really a pharaoh for real? Even though you're..." He stops. You smile even though I'm what? He stares at the floor. Not a man, he mumbles. You tilt your head. What makes a pharaoh? He shrugs. The crown, the beard, the chariot, the gods. You nod. Then I guess I am. He looks up, grins, then runs. You keep the figurine. That night you place it on the windowsill of your chamber where moonlight can find it. You lie on your side, staring at it long after the palace has gone quiet. There is something sacred in its awkwardness, something honest. The next day you write a decree. It's short, barely 50 words, but it changes everything. You order the construction of a temple, not for a god, but for a concept balance. A temple to Ma'at, open to all, with no altar, only open sky and water, and a stone bench for people to sit and speak. They will hate it, but they will remember it. The decision stirs up dust, not literally, though plenty of that is flying too, as masons begin marking the spot by the riverbank where the new temple will rise. No altar, no icons, just balance. The scribes struggle to write about it because there's no precedent. The priests scowl behind your back because there's no God at the center of it. And the architects, they ask too many questions. What's the point of a temple that doesn't pray to anyone? You tell them that balance is someone, or maybe everyone. They nod slowly, then begin to build. But the real noise comes from the court. One advisor calls it a waste. A monument to nothing, he mutters, unaware that the servant pouring your wine will repeat it by sunset. Another worries it will attract the wrong kind of attention. Rebels, dreamers, philosophers, he hisses. You try not to smile. Because yes, those are exactly the people it will attract. Mainstream historical fact. Though most temples in Egypt were dedicated to specific deities, some rulers introduced more abstract symbols of order and philosophy. While not common, there are inscriptions and court records that hint at cults or spaces devoted to ideals like truth, justice, or balance, particularly under reformist rulers. You decide to visit the site yourself. You arrive on foot. No litter, no guard parade. Just you, in linen plain enough that children wave without fear and fishermen nod without kneeling. The builders pause, uncertain whether they should bow or keep chiseling. You tell them to keep working. A small girl, probably the mason's daughter, walks up and hands you a handful of smooth river pebbles. For the steps, she says, so they don't cut your feet. You kneel. Take them. That's very kind. She nods, then runs off before anyone can scold her. The pebbles go in your sleeve. That afternoon you return to the palace and find the priest of Amun waiting. His beard is perfectly curled. His cuffs smell of oil and incense. He bows, but not low enough. I must speak plainly, he says. You arch an eyebrow. There is concern, he continues, that your recent preferences may upset the order of things. Ah, you say, Mayat must be very fragile indeed if my thoughts can break her. Quirky tidbit. In some temple correspondence, high priests would subtly reprimand rulers by invoking cosmic balance, warning that disturbances to sacred tradition might anger the gods and lead to natural disasters like failed harvests or illness. Basically, it was ancient PR spin. The priest tries again. We merely wish to advise you. Then advise me, you say, but do not mistake your advice for law. He bows again, this time lower. You dismiss him with a flick of your hand. Later that evening, your scribe reads you a scroll sent from the eastern provinces, a poem, anonymous, 4 stanzas long. It speaks of a woman with stars in her hair and fire in her sandals, who walks between gods and men and speaks only truth. It ends with a single line, etched in gold ink: "May she not be forgotten when the tombs crumble." You don't recognize the author, but you recognize the fear behind it and the hope. Historians still argue whether rulers inspired this kind of underground poetry, or whether such works were created long after their deaths as legends outgrew facts. Some claim royal censors would have burned such verses. Others say they quietly passed them along. You have the poem copied 3 times. 1 copy for your archive, 1 for your chamber wall, and 1 you fold carefully and hide beneath the clay figurine the boy brought you. That night, thunder rolls across the desert, a storm rare this season. You lie awake, counting the space between lightning and thunder, listening to the wind rattle the shutters like a nervous scribe. Your lady in waiting asks if she should summon the priests for protection. "No," you whisper. "Let the sky have its voice." You dream again, but this time you're not seated on a throne. You're walking through the balanced temple, barefoot, feeling the stones still warm from the sun. People gather around you, not kneeling, not chanting, just listening, and you speak. You say only one word: "Stay." They do. In the dream, no one argues. No one takes notes. The temple doesn't need permission. It simply exists. You wake with a quiet kind of certainty, not the kind that roars, the kind that settles deep into your bones and tells you that what you're building will outlast your name, even if your statues are chipped and your scrolls fade to dust. And somehow that's enough. By the time the temple to balance reaches its halfway point, the air around the palace has changed, not loudly, not all at once, but like the subtle shift in a breeze before the rain. You start to sense it: fewer sidelong glances, fewer priests accidentally misquoting your decrees. The scribes start writing more quickly when you enter the chamber. Even the court artists stop trying to make your face more masculine in the frescoes. It's not respect exactly, not yet, but it's no longer disbelief. This morning you rise to find a scroll left at your bedside. No seal, no name. Just a hand-drawn sketch of the temple in progress, with birds flying above, and a simple caption scrawled underneath: "May your silence teach louder than our laws." You don't know who sent it. You keep it. Mainstream historical fact: in ancient Egypt, female rulers sometimes had to reshape not just politics, but perception. By controlling the visual narrative through temple art, public works, and ritual symbolism, they carved a place in history where there had previously been none. Hatshepsut, for example, commissioned hundreds of statues of herself as both woman and man to reinforce legitimacy. You eat a small breakfast: bread, olives, sweet beer. The olive pits roll across your plate like dice. You idly wonder what they'd say if this were a game, if your future could be guessed by the shape of a stone. You've started thinking like that lately, in symbols, in metaphors. It's what happens when you become an icon, before you become a memory. After the meal, you walk the gallery halls. Your father's statues line the walls here, stiff, unmoving, carved from granite and pride. You stop before one. The lips are thin, the eyes almost angry. The inscription below reads, "He who brought the floods to heal." You snort softly. He never even liked fish, a fringe historical tidbit. Some royal children would intentionally alter inscriptions about their predecessors, not to erase them, but to recast them. A heroic general becomes a loving father. A distant bureaucrat becomes a fierce war leader. Memory is not truth. It's choreography. You continue down the hallway and find your own statue being sculpted. The artist stands on a small ladder, smoothing your cheekbone in the limestone. The features are strong but not harsh. The eyes, wide lips, slightly parted, hand outstretched, not clutching a crook, but offering a scroll.
You made me look thoughtful, you say. He nearly drops his chisel. Sorry, Your Majesty, I thought. It's all right, you say. Thoughtful is a fine thing to be. He bows deeply, so low his forehead brushes the dust. You leave him to it. That afternoon you receive another marriage proposal. This time it comes with gifts. Amber from the Levant, spices from Punt, gold-lipped oxen horns, polished like mirrors. The prince's envoy reads the scroll aloud with too much pride. When he finishes, you stare at him for a long time, then ask, "Did he build anything, Your Majesty? This prince of yours, has he built anything with his hands? A temple, a well, a bridge, a garden?" The envoy shifts. He commands armies. You wave a hand. So do I. The silence stretches. I'll consider it. You say you won't. But it's polite to lie with elegance. Historians still argue whether pharaohs, especially female ones, truly had freedom to reject political marriages. Some records suggest they did. Others say it was a dangerous fiction, maintained only when it served both parties. The truth likely shifts, depending on whose tomb you read it from. Later, you walk the riverbank near the new temple. The workers have started laying the central stone. You place your hand on it. It's warm. A crane flies overhead, casting a long shadow over the work site. One of the masons whistles softly, a lullaby maybe, or a song of the Nile. The wind catches it and carries it upriver. You stay longer than you meant to. The stone beneath your hand doesn't move, and you think neither will the memory of this. When you return to the palace, you find your chamber window has blown open. The little clay figurine on your sill has tipped onto its side. You pick it up, set it upright. This time you press your forehead to its painted brow. "I see you," you whisper. And for just a second, it feels like something sees you back. You wake to smoke, not thick. Not dangerous, but sharp. The kind of smoke that speaks of dried herbs and intention. It curls through the stone corridors like a whisper, as if even the fire itself isn't quite sure it's allowed to be here. You sit up slowly. The maid outside your door knocks once, soft, respectful. "There's been a fire," she says. "The East Archive." You don't bother dressing in full regalia, just a loose linen robe and the carved necklace your mother gave you, the one with the turquoise scarab that always seems to glow a little in the morning light. The archive is already smoldering by the time you arrive. Not destroyed, thank the gods, but damaged. One wing, the scrolls kept closest to the outside, blackened and curling like dried leaves in autumn. A dozen clay storage jars burst from the heat. The scent is odd papyrus wax resin and something else, almost sweet, like a lie that finally caught fire. You kneel near the edge of the burn line and pick up a charred piece of scroll. The ink is half visible. "Oath before the Nile shall not be undone." Your throat tightens. Mainstream historical fact in ancient Egypt. Oaths spoken near or on the Nile were considered sacred and unbreakable, as the river itself was seen as a witness. Vows made in its presence, even informal ones, were sometimes used as legal grounds in disputes, particularly in matters of marriage, inheritance, and property. The scroll in your hand was likely a record of one such vow. Someone didn't want it read again. You stand and turn to your advisor. He looks pale. "Who had access?" "We're still asking," he says. "Of course you are. By mid-morning, you've questioned 6 scribes, 3 guards, and 1 terrified cleaning boy. No one saw anything, but the look in their eyes that says everything. Fear. Someone is afraid of your memory, of what might last after you're gone. So you do the one thing they'll never expect. You write it down again, yourself. No scribes, no witnesses. You unroll a fresh scroll, grind your own ink, light your own lamp. And as the Nile flows beyond your window, you begin. Let it be known that words once spoken do not disappear, even when parchment burns. The air remembers. The water carries. The stone endures. You copy every vow you recall, every name, every moment. Quirky tidbit. There are rare records often scratched into stone or left as graffiti of pharaohs or high officials rewriting burned or lost decrees by memory alone. In some cases, these rewrites were later discovered to be more accurate than the originals, leading some historians to believe that certain rulers had trained their memory like scribes train their hand. Your memory is sharp, sharper now than ever. That night you summon the temple builders and request a new chamber, small, windowless, with thick walls. Not a tomb, you tell them, a memory house. They don't question you. They begin drawing plans. Historians still argue whether memory houses truly existed or were just metaphors used in poetry. Some believe they were
secret rooms built beneath temples or palaces meant to store a ruler's private truths, unfiltered by priests, unedited by court scribes. You intend to build one and fill it, not with gold or scrolls, but with clay, small figures, carved stories, unfired tablets, things even fire would hesitate to consume. Later, after the builders have left and the hallways fall silent again, you walk alone to the garden. It's nearly midnight. The moon hangs low and full, painting everything silver. You find your old bench, the one by the lotus pond, and sit with your feet just above the water. You remember sitting here once with your sister, years ago. She had asked you what you'd do if no one ever believed in your crown. You'd said, "I'll make them believe in my shadow." She'd laughed, called it dramatic. You smile now in the quiet and answer her ghost softly. Turns out shadows last longer than faces. The wind picks up rustling the papyrus reeds. You close your eyes, let it all move past, then open them again and walk back inside. Because tomorrow there is more to write. The new memory chamber is already echoing with purpose before the stone even dries. It's not large, barely the size of a merchant's storeroom, but the ceiling arches high like a wave about to crash. No windows, just a single torch bracket, a carved stone bench, and walls so smooth they reflect your footsteps. When the builders ask what to inscribe on the door, you tell them nothing. Let it look like a pantry or a forgotten closet. Let it be plain, because what happens inside won't be. That morning, you bring your first offering, a small clay tablet, hand-formed, no bigger than your palm. On it, the first line of your decree, "I ruled, not because I was allowed, but because I was able." You set it in the center of the floor. Alone it seems small, but it's a beginning. Mainstream historical fact, although literacy in ancient Egypt was mostly limited to scribes. Some rulers, especially controversial ones, were known to write or dictate private reflections that never made it into official temple records. These personal documents were sometimes discovered hidden behind false walls or sealed inside canopic jars, suggesting a desire to speak outside the usual systems of power. You begin a ritual, not one taught by priests, one of your own. Every time someone underestimates you, you write a word. Every time they try to erase you, you make a mark. Every time you're told to be grateful for permission you never asked for, you shape a figure in clay. The memory chamber begins to fill. A figure of the boy with the reed necklace. A slab carved with your mother's voice, well, as close as stone can come to it. A small sculpture of your hand holding a scroll, fingers etched with care. Some days you spend hours down there. Other days you just visit for a moment, to breathe the quiet, to remember that power isn't only about palaces and parades. Sometimes it's about having a place no one else can rewrite. Quirky tidbit. There's evidence that some rulers kept private sanctuaries, neither temple nor tomb, where they performed rituals of memory preservation. These rituals included whispering names to uncarved stones, tracing words into wet clay, and even composing lullabies meant to be remembered only by the wind. Whether any of it worked, no one can say. One afternoon, a young scribe stumbles into the outer corridor. You hear his footsteps pause outside the door, the faint intake of breath, the awkward shuffle of someone pretending they weren't curious. You open the door. He freezes. I was just delivering the tax receipts, he stammers. To a locked, windowless room. I got lost. You tilt your head, then smile. Do you know how to shape clay? No. Would you like to learn? His face says no. His heart says yes. You hand him a small ball of clay and a dull stylus. Start with your name, you say, but not the one on your scrolls, the one you use when no one's listening. He looks up at you like he's not sure if this is a test or a miracle. You close the door behind him. Historians still argue whether these kinds of unofficial apprenticeships ever happened. Some say pharaohs were too isolated to engage personally with low-ranking staff. Others argue that the most enduring legacies come from those small, strange connections never officially recorded, but deeply real. You teach him how to center a shape, how to feel when the clay is ready. You don't tell him what to write. That's the point. Afterward, he leaves with red, dusted fingers and wide eyes. You don't see him again for weeks. But one day, you find a tiny sculpture tucked behind your tablet of laws. A fish, uneven, a little lopsided, but full of joy. Someone has pressed tiny stars into its sides like scales that remember the night. You keep it. Place it beside your first offering. That night you dream of rivers that glow in the dark and hands, so many hands pressing stories into the earth, one thumbprint at a time. When you wake, your fingers itch for more clay. There are still so many memories left to shape. You stop dreaming of palaces. That's the first sign. No more marble columns or gold-fringed thrones. Instead, your dreams are filled with dust, with clay, with flickering torches, and the sound of stone echoing under bare feet. The memory chamber has followed you into your sleep, which seems only fair since you've given it so many waking hours. By now, it's almost full. The floor is crowded with clay objects, tablets, small busts, tiny pots etched with single words. Some are yours, some aren't. A few have appeared without explanation. One morning, you find a series of smooth pebbles arranged in a spiral, each one painted with a fingertip of blue pigment. Another time, a tiny set of footprints made of wax sealed under a flat tile. No names, no notes, just offerings. Mainstream historical fact. Although pharaohs were surrounded by layers of bureaucracy, certain rituals, particularly those involving the afterlife, were intensely personal. Some rulers secretly commissioned shadow items that wouldn't be recorded in temple logs but would accompany them in tombs or private vaults. These weren't meant for the gods. They were meant for themselves. You understand now. You're not building a legacy for history. You're building a place to be known. One quiet evening, a priest request's audience. Not one of the high ones, the lower acolytes, the kind who sweep the steps and change the oil in the lamps. You've never spoken to him directly. He kneels before you, trembling slightly. I have. Something he says.
If it pleases your majesty. You nod. From inside his robe, he pulls out a folded scrap of linen. Inside, a necklace. Simple. River stones and a carved bead in the shape of an ibis. The kind of charm a child might make. It belonged to my sister, he whispers. She loved your voice. Your breath catches. She used to say you sounded like truth, not the kind in scrolls, the kind you feel in your stomach. You reach out. He places the necklace in your palm like he's surrendering a soul. She's gone now, he says, but I wanted you to have this, so she's not forgotten. You want to say something profound. Instead, you murmur, "Thank you." After he leaves, you sit alone for a long time, turning the necklace over and over. Later, in the memory chamber, you don't place it on the floor like the others. Instead, you hang it from a carved hook on the wall, just above your first clay tablet. Some things deserve height. Quirky tidbit. In some tombs, archaeologists have found items placed unusually high on ledges, in niches, even suspended from ceilings. Some scholars believe this wasn't just for protection, but a symbolic elevation. Things placed high were thought to be closer to the divine, or simply harder to forget. You've started humming when you work, just little melodies, half-forgotten lullabies from your childhood mixed with the rhythm of your shaping hands. You don't sing for anyone. You don't even think the gods are listening. It's more like a way to keep time, to keep stillness from becoming silence. Historians still argue whether the concept of private ritual music existed in ancient Egypt. Some believe all music was performative or religious. Others suggest that rulers, like anyone else, had quiet songs never meant for crowds. Songs for grief or memory, or just keeping company with their own thoughts. One day you catch someone else humming. You turn around. The young scribe, the one who shaped the crooked fish, is back. He's taller, his hand steadier, but the same nervous energy radiates from him like heat. I brought this, he says, holding out a sealed clay jar. It's something I made. You nod. He sets it down. It's not important, he adds, then hesitates. But it's mine. You wait. He leaves. Later, when you open it, you find a handful of small clay birds, each one different. Some with wings outstretched, some with curled feet, one with its head tucked under like it's sleeping. No words, no markings, just the birds. You place them in a circle. You don't need to explain why. That night you light every torch in the memory chamber. Let the shadows dance. Let the stories breathe. You walk slowly barefoot between the offerings. You don't count them. Numbers are for taxes. This room is for weight, for breath.
for proof. You stand in the center, and for once you feel like you're not pretending. You are not a girl in a robe, not a body in a crown. You are a vessel of memory. You are a whisper made solid. And even if no temple ever names you, this room will. You forget how many days have passed since you first lit the memory chamber. Time now is measured in objects, in the soft scrape of stylus on clay, in the weight of silence between entries. You no longer ask how long you've spent underground. The days above have blurred into ceremony and audience, and nodding through endless decrees. But down here, it's real. Mainstream historical fact. The ancient Egyptians placed immense importance on Mayat, the concept of balance, truth, and harmony. While the state upheld Mahat in law and order, individuals, especially rulers, were expected to uphold it in thought and memory. Personal rituals were one way of keeping that balance, especially in times of political instability. And this is very much a time of instability. Rumors swirl through the palace like dust in a shaft of sunlight. Your cousin in the north has declared himself guardian of tradition. A general whispers of dreams where Horus denies your offerings. The priests have stopped using your chosen name in their chants. None of them confront you directly, of course, but their silence is louder than any shout. You respond the only way you can. You write. Another clay tablet. I was not chosen by gods. I chose myself. Another figure. A lioness with broken teeth still standing. Another offering a dried lotus, pressed gently into soft clay petals, flaring like a slow sigh. Quirky tidbit. Some rulers were buried with personalized tokens, not meant to impress the gods, but to remind them of themselves. Archaeologists have uncovered small, seemingly insignificant items, like reed flutes or toy boats buried beside royal figures, items that had no official meaning, but told a private story. You wonder what they'll find if they ever find this chamber, and if they'll understand. One evening, as the sky turns the color of spilled wine, you visit the riverbank. Not for ceremony, just to sit. A boat drifts past its oars, barely rippling the surface. You listen to the hush of water, to the reeds, clicking in the breeze. A heron lands a few paces away and stands there perfectly still, watching, waiting, like memory made feathered flesh. You speak softly, not to the heron, not even to yourself, just to the air. You speak a name you've never written, the one that belonged to someone who never made it into any scroll, a name you've buried behind layers of responsibility and survival. Saying it out loud feels like breaking a rule you forgot you made. The heron does not fly away. Historians still argue whether personal mourning rituals, especially those involving secret names, existed among the ruling class. While the public funerary rites were elaborate and codified, some believe private rituals were conducted at night, away from the temples, involving whispers, tokens, and the symbolic release of names into the wind. You return to the chamber and shape a hollow figure. No eyes, no mouth.
You inscribe only the name curling inside the cavity. Then you seal it. You don't need to see it again. Knowing it's there is enough. Later that week, a servant brings you an offering from a village you've never heard of. A rough, hand-woven cloth. Inside 3 things: a crushed olive branch, a bit of honeycomb, and a stone with a groove in the center. No note. But somehow you understand. The honey for sweetness, the olive for peace, and the groove, it's for a thumb, a memory stone. You add it to the chamber, in a quiet corner beside the fish and the birds. You're beginning to realize something. This chamber isn't just yours anymore.
It belongs to everyone who believes memory has weight. To the scribes who dare to dream in clay. To the maids who whisper songs not meant for temple ears. To the priest who gave you a necklace that still smells faintly of incense and river wind. Each piece added is a rebellion against forgetting, and a small, slow promise that truth can outlive pageantry. You light a single lamp, sit on the cool floor, and close your eyes. Just for a minute. The chamber holds its breath with you. When the summons comes, you're not surprised. It's wrapped in silk, perfumed with frankincense, tied with a cord the color of dried blood. A messenger delivers it, with eyes lowered and hands trembling. You don't open it right away. You let it sit beside your plate while you eat, while the servants clear your cup, while the lamps are trimmed for the evening. You already know what it says. They want you to abdicate. Not in so many words, of course. They never say step down. They say transition. They say stability. They say in the interest of unity. But the meaning is clear. Your rule is a problem. Your memory is too sharp. Your presence too firm. They want a story easier to explain. Mainstream historical fact. Female rulers in Egypt, even those officially crowned, were often erased or minimized after death. Hatshepsut, for example, had her images defaced and her name chiseled out of monuments by successors who preferred a neater timeline. It wasn't just political, it was narrative control. You read the scroll twice, then burn it, not because it's dramatic, but because you already know they've sent copies to every major temple and provincial palace. They don't need your response, but they're going to get one anyway. You return to the memory chamber. No servants, no scribes, just you and the soft breath of flame. You kneel beside your first tablet, the one that began it all. I ruled not because I was allowed, but because I was able. You lift it, turn it over. The underside is still smooth, untouched. You carve a second line. I end not because I was weak, but because they were afraid. Then, for the first time, you speak aloud. Not a whisper, not a chant, a full voice. You speak your whole name, the name they used, the name you claimed, the name they want to forget. You let it echo, and then you place the tablet down, this time upside down. Not hidden, just waiting for someone curious enough to flip it. Quirky tidbit.
Some pharaohs commissioned dual-faced artifacts items that bore one version of their story on one side and a different truth on the other. These pieces were sometimes buried separately from the tombs or sealed in walls. Scholars are still debating whether they were intended to be found at all. A week later, a festival is held in your honor. You do not attend. The high priests sing praises carefully, stripped of gender. The nobles offer wine and fruit and careful applause. A golden statue of you is paraded through the streets, but its face has been resculpted to match the next successor's profile. Slightly, you watch from behind a linen veil. It's a fine celebration, polished, untroubled, false. But the people cheer anyway because the bread is fresh and the wine is strong and they are tired of uncertainty. You don't blame them. You clap when they clap. You smile when they smile. And when they sing your name, you mouth it along, but only the version you left behind. Later that night, when the torches burn low and the revelers are sleeping, you return once more to the chamber, this time with a basket. Inside a spool of thread, a comb made of bone, and a ring carved from a pomegranate seed. Objects from your childhood, things that were never royal, never ceremonial, just yours. You place them gently in the far corner of the chamber, beneath a painted tile of a child's face, yours as you remember it, not as it was ever carved. Then you sit just for a while and think, not about what you were, but what might remain. Historians still argue whether rulers in decline ever tried to preserve their legacies outside of state records. While temple inscriptions focused on divine achievements and military conquests, some theorize that secret vaults like yours were attempts to seed alternate histories, versions that couldn't be publicly acknowledged but might one day be discovered. You run your fingers along the tiles. You don't need them to survive forever. You just need them to outlast the lie. You wake to quiet, not silence. There's always a bird outside the window, always the rustle of linen as servants begin their day, but something has changed. The palace feels slower, as if the walls themselves are listening, holding their breath for what comes next. You dress yourself, not in ceremonial garb, not in layers of gold and linen designed to shimmer under temple light, just a simple robe, the kind you used to wear before titles, before rituals, before the crown was set on your head like a yoke. You descend to the chamber, and this time you bring a guest. She's young, no older than you were when you first entered this place. A student scribe, recently apprenticed, quiet and curious, and always watching when she thinks no one notices. You've noticed. You lead her down the torch-lit steps, her sandals scuffing lightly behind you, and pause at the threshold. Don't speak, you whisper. She nods. The memory chamber has never looked fuller or quieter. Every offering holds its own space, its own gravity. The air hums with meaning, as if the clay is thinking. You walk slowly,
letting her follow, showing her the arc of what's been built. This, you murmur, is the truth they'll try to erase. Mainstream historical fact, oral history, and material culture often served as parallel records in ancient Egypt, while stone inscriptions celebrated state-approved triumphs. It was in household shrines and buried amulets that individuals passed down more intimate contested truths. These relics sometimes tell stories state scribes refuse to record. You pause in front of the lioness with broken teeth. She fought, you say. Then to the ibis necklace still hanging, she remembered. Then to the sealed figure with the whispered name, she mourned. The girl doesn't ask questions, but you can see the questions behind her eyes. You smile. You'll make something of your own one day, you say. Not yet, but soon. She nods again. And you know when you are gone, she will return, not to rule, but to remember. You let her take one item with her. She chooses a single bird from the circle, not the prettiest, not the best formed, but the one whose wings are tilted like it's about to lift off. Quirky tidbit. In some cases, students or acolytes were entrusted with minor items from the private collections of royalty tokens meant to test loyalty or inspire continuity. These weren't treasures, they were trust. Scholars have found small heirlooms in provincial homes that trace back to elite origins quietly handed down through generations. When she leaves, you seal the chamber, not permanently, just for now. There are other duties, other rituals to endure. You still have to walk the line between what is and what is allowed. But the chamber has taught you something. Your memory doesn't depend on their approval. It depends on action. So you begin the slow process of turning your story into a quiet inheritance. You teach. You ask questions the scribes are too careful to pose. You praise not just skill, but courage. You build a different kind of power, not one that sits on a throne, but one that passes hand to hand like a torch. Historians still argue whether this kind of legacy building was deliberate or incidental. Some believe forgotten pharaohs hoped for rediscovery through grand gestures. Others argue it was the small human choices, mentoring, sharing, shaping, that allowed their names to survive the chisel's erasure. You no longer care who is right. You're not building an empire. You're building a path. And even if it fades into dust for a time, it only takes one step to find it again. One curious girl, one clay bird, one name remembered. Your sandals leave shallow impressions in the dust as you walk through the palace garden. The trees are taller now, older, the same way you feel. Their shadows stretch long across the stone paths, gentle reminders that everything eventually leans toward the earth. You used to walk here in full regalia, jewels, clinking fabric, swishing attendants, fussing behind you like anxious birds. But now, just your robe, just your thoughts, and the quiet company of time. You pause beneath the sycamore. It's grown wild, unruly, twisting, like it's trying to reach both the sun and the underworld.
At once, you smile. You always liked the stubborn trees. Beneath it, a small bundle of linen. At first you think it's an offering, a votive, but when you bend down, it moves. Inside a kitten, scrappy, striped, slightly cross-eyed. Someone's snuck it into the garden and left it here, either as a gift or as an accident. You scoop it up. It doesn't protest, just purrs like it belongs in your arms. Mainstream historical fact. Cats were sacred in ancient Egypt, not just as symbols of protection, but as living guardians against evil spirits and vermin alike. Killing a cat, even by accident, was punishable by death during certain dynasties. They were often mummified and buried with honor. You name it, Seti, after the old word for dazzle. It follows you everywhere. Climbs the drapes, steals your ink, falls asleep curled in your lap during state meetings, completely unfazed by royal nonsense. Seti becomes a fixture of the palace. Whispers spread. The old ruler communes with Bastet, they say. The cat chooses truth. You don't deny it. You lean in. You start speaking to Seti in public, not about policy, about poetry, about dreams, about what it means to remember. Seti meows at all the right moments. You're sure the scribes are secretly taking notes. Quirky tidbit. In later periods of Egyptian history, some nobles commissioned portraits of their favorite pets, alongside religious figures, blurring the line between affection and divine symbolism. One such image shows a lapdog offered incense in a temple mural. Scholars still debate whether this was satire, reverence, or both. But even Seti gets old. One day he limps instead of runs. One day he doesn't steal the ribbon from your scrolls. And then quietly, he doesn't wake. You bury him beneath the sycamore. No tomb, no ceremony, just a tile, a single line. He remembered joy. You sit beside it for a long time. And when you return to the memory chamber that night, you bring a carving, small, smooth, full of motion. Seti, mid-pounce, eyes wide, tail curled like laughter. You place it beside the fish. The chamber accepts it. You exhale. Historians still argue whether royal memory chambers were expanded late in life or left untouched once established. Some claim additions broke spiritual balance. Others believe the chamber evolved like a second soul, growing as its keeper grew. A parallel self. You now believe the latter. Because the older you get, the more you understand memory isn't just what we save. It's what we choose to save and who we save it for. You leave the torch burning low. You walk slowly back through the hallways, tapping the walls like they're old friends, murmuring thanks for keeping your secrets this long. In your chamber, you sleep lightly and dream of a striped kitten chasing birds in a sunlit garden, always just one step behind.
The scribe returns years later, older now, confident in her stride, deliberate in her silence. She doesn't ask permission. She finds you seated near the window, watching the river shift its color under the morning sun. You don't rise, just gesture to the cushion beside you. She sits. She places something on the low table between you, a small tablet of polished stone, etched with characters so fine they catch the light, like threads. You read it slowly. It's a name. Yours. Not the temple version, not the one carved on monuments or chanted by priests. The other name. The real name. The one you whispered only to Seti in the memory chamber. The name they tried to erase. You glance at her. She shrugs. It wanted to be remembered, she says. Mainstream historical fact. Some ancient Egyptian names were preserved not in public inscriptions, but in private tokens, rings, cosmetics jars, even laundry marks that survived longer than official temple records. These artifacts often carry the only known traces of female rulers whose public identities were erased or overwritten. You ask where she found it. She doesn't answer, just smiles and says, "It's mine now." The meaning hangs between you, not ownership, but responsibility. In preserving it, she's accepted the burden of carrying it forward. You nod. She tells you about her students, about the scrolls they write, the questions they ask, the ways they mimic and resist the forms of the old texts. They want to know what's real, she says, what really happened. You chuckle. Then they're doomed, you say. She laughs too, because you both know history is never the full story. It's just the loudest one that survives. But sometimes the quiet ones linger longer. She asks if she can visit the chamber again. You hesitate, not because you mind, but because you're not sure how much longer you'll be able to guide her there. Your knees hurt. Your breath shortens more often now. You find yourself drifting into memories without meaning to, walking into rooms, forgetting why, staring at objects you once held every day, and wondering if you're looking at them for the last time. So you nod. Yes. But bring someone with you, someone who listens. Quirky tidbit. There's evidence some royal tombs included generational keys, inscriptions, or puzzles designed to only be understood by those taught the oral tradition. Like riddles meant to be passed down, they ensured knowledge flowed through trusted lines. Whether symbolic or literal, these memory chains gave future caretakers access that outsiders lacked. She leans forward. There's one more thing, she says. She reaches into her sleeve and pulls out a clay bird. Not one of yours. A new one. Crude, clumsy, and perfect. It's perched mid-step as if caught in the moment between fear and flight. Its beak open, its wings unsure. You take it in both hands. You feel the future in its weight. I didn't know what to call it, she says softly. So I didn't name it. You don't need to. You know what it is. It's not an offering. It's a mirror. You stand slowly, joints complaining all the way, and guide her back down the familiar stairs, this time letting her go first. She hesitates at the door. You unlock it.
She steps inside, and this time she doesn't need you to explain a thing. Historians still argue whether memory chambers were ever meant to be heirlooms. Some believe they were tombs without corpses, emotional time capsules sealed for personal closure. Others suggest they were proto-archives preserving not state records, but private truths meant to outlive dynasties. Either way, you're glad you built yours.
Because even if your name vanishes from the temples, a bird with no name still sings. The sun is starting to slide behind the palms when the first sharp breath catches in your chest. It doesn't feel like panic. It's not sudden, not loud. It's more like someone nudged a door inside your ribs, just a little, then left it hanging open to the wind. The air feels thinner than usual. Your fingers feel clumsy as you try to lift your cup of lotus tea, and your sandals don't quite find the floor in the same way they always have. You try to ignore it. You've had worse mornings, worse years, really. Once you survived an entire summer of ceremonial obligations in 100-degree heat, wrapped in gold-threaded linen, with a migraine and a stubborn priest breathing garlic in your face. You didn't die then. You probably won't die now. But still, you sit down. And once you do, you don't stand back up. Your favorite physician is called. You know her well by now. She's younger than your oldest sandals and smarter than your whole council combined. She arrives with calm fingers and tight lips. And when she touches your wrist, her brow creases, but just barely. That's how you know. Mainstream historical fact. Egyptian court physicians often used a combination of touch-based diagnostics, herbal treatments, and spiritual rituals. Their tools included not just ointments and scalpels, but amulets, prayers, and even dream interpretations to understand the patient's condition. Breath and heartbeat were seen as indicators of both health and divine balance. You lie back against the cushions. The ceiling above you is painted with constellations, stars that never move, gold leaf suns that never dim. You remember choosing those designs yourself. You'd insisted the artist's copy, the night sky, exactly as it looked the evening you first stepped into the palace as ruler. Not because it was astrologically significant, but because it was yours. The young scribe comes too. She kneels quietly by the foot of your bed. She doesn't speak, just watches. You remember when she couldn't make eye contact without blushing? Now her gaze is steady, strong. You want to laugh at how she used to hold her reed pen like it might bite her. She's brought the clay bird, the one she made for you. It's been wrapped in silk. When she unfolds it, the soft cloth falls away like mist, revealing the crude little form, wings outstretched, beak slightly off-center tail, broken and re-glued. It's beautiful. You nod toward the table beside your bed. She sets it down gently, like it might shatter just from being watched. Quirky tidbit. In ancient Egyptian tradition, broken items weren't always discarded. If they held emotional or spiritual value, they were carefully mended sometimes with visible seams, then placed among personal possessions or funerary offerings. Some archaeologists believe the visible repairs were intentional, marking the object as lived and therefore sacred. Your cat Seti is long gone, but his cushion remains near your feet. Someone fluffed it this morning out of habit. You smile at it, like he might still come curling around the corner. You ask the girl, no, the woman, if she remembers where the memory chamber key is kept. She nods. She's always known. You ask her if she's ready. She doesn't nod this time, just takes your hand. The pain isn't sharp now. It's more like pressure, like the weight of a crown, but upside down, inside out, resting on your ribs instead of your head. You breathe through it, slowly, carefully. The window is open. The scent of papyrus blossoms and river wind drifts in. There's laughter outside, probably one of the cooks scolding a page boy for stealing fruit again. You always let them steal. That's what fruit is for. You whisper something. It's not a prayer. It's not even a full sentence. Just a sound, a shape. The woman leans in close. She hears it. She understands. Historians still argue whether dying pharaohs were allowed true privacy in their final hours. Some sources suggest a chamber full of attendants, priests, scribes, and officials documenting every breath. Others insist certain rulers, particularly female or controversial ones, were permitted a quieter death with only their chosen few by their side. You're glad for the quiet. You're glad for her. You close your eyes, and what you see is not a throne, not a temple, not a battlefield or a scroll. You see clay, rows and rows of it, carved and painted and cracked and warm. You see hands, not royal hands, not divine hands, but human ones, shaping memory out of mud. You see a girl with ink-stained fingers, giggling as she hides a bird under her sleeve. You see a striped cat leaping between columns, chasing shadows. You see a sycamore tree, wild and laughing in the wind. You see a name, not carved into stone, but whispered into clay. Yours. Not the one they gave you, the one you kept. The one you shared only with the stars on your ceiling and the birds on your shelf and the girl who never stopped listening. And you breathe once more. Not because you must, but because you can. Because this too is part of remembering. Because even if the last sound in your throat never reaches another ear, your story has already begun to echo elsewhere, in hands that carry clay, in feet that descend steps in silence, in voices that ask gently, what did she remember? And someone will answer, she remembered everything. You wake up, but not quite. The room is still. Your breath moves in and out, like the tide, quiet, slow, steady. You're not in pain anymore, not cold, not exactly warm either. Just floating somewhere between linen sheets and memory. Outside, the sycamore tree rustles softly, like it's trying not to wake you. The air smells like sand, just after a storm, earthy, sharp, clean. Someone has lit incense, and the scent curls into the corners of the chamber like an old friend arriving unannounced. You open your eyes.
The light is golden. Everything glows. But the room is empty. No scribes. No physicians. No worried faces whispering about pulse or legacy. Just you and the clay bird. You sit up easily, impossibly. Your joints don't creak. Your breath is light. You move across the floor without touching it. Each step is memory, not muscle. You pass through the hallway, trailing no sound. And when you reach the chamber, the memory chamber, the door is already open. Mainstream historical fact. Tombs of elite Egyptians were often built to be visited, not just sealed forever. Some were designed with false doors, architectural features that symbolized portals between the living and the dead. Visitors could leave offerings, say names aloud, or speak messages to the spirit beyond. The belief was simple: to speak the name of the dead is to let them live again. The chamber feels different now. Not darker, not lonelier, fuller. Each object hums with the energy of hands that once held it. The garments you stored have softened into their folds. The tools are not waiting for use, they are being used. Every shelf, every alcove glows gently with memory. You reach the center. There she is, the woman with the ink-stained fingers. She's not alone. She's teaching now. Her voice is low, confident. She gestures toward a new panel, one you never built, never touched. It's her addition, carefully carved. Strange glyphs alongside traditional ones. Symbols you don't recognize mixed with others that haven't been used since your youth. The chamber is growing. You smile. Quirky tidbit. In a few rare tombs, archaeologists have found later modifications, additions, clearly made decades after the original occupant died. These include new wall art, extra inscriptions, and even secret alcoves. Some believe these were acts of devotion by descendants or caretakers, not grave robbers. They weren't stealing, they were continuing the story. The students notice you, or maybe not you, but the idea of you. They turn toward the center of the room and pause. The woman sets down her stylus. She walks over. She doesn't speak. She just places her hand over her heart. And you, whatever you are, now, nod. She turns back to her students, to her life, to her work, and you step backward, not because you're retreating, but because you are at last free to go. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians believed in personal afterlives or collective ones. Did the soul persist alone, or did it join the grand memory of the Nile? Some theories propose a kind of memory-based immortality, where what mattered most wasn't the body, but the impact you left behind, the shape of your story in someone else's hands. You drift upward, not to a throne, not to judgment, just out into the folds of time, into the warm humming hush of a name remembered, a story retold, a bird of clay passed from hand to hand. And when your name is spoken again, not by a priest or a record keeper, but by a girl sitting cross-legged on the floor of the chamber. You helped shape it doesn't echo. It breathes. Because memory isn't stone, it's song. And yours has just begun another verse. You're not entirely sure where you are now, but it doesn't feel like a place that needs walls. The sky overhead is vast and soft, like linen left in the sun too long. There's no sun you can point to, and yet the light is everywhere, gentle, golden, weightless. You are neither standing nor floating, you just are. And below you, memory, not just yours anymore. Whole lives glimmer beneath the surface like river stones catching light. You see people laughing, crying, whispering secrets, holding hands. You see offerings left beside beds and tombs and windowsills. You see clay birds wrapped in silk. You see names not etched in stone, but whispered into cups of tea, hummed into lullabies, scribbled into the margins of love letters. You see her again, the girl with the ink-stained fingers, though now her fingers are calloused, confident. She's still teaching, still telling your story, though it's not only yours anymore, it's hers, theirs, a tapestry of retellings. She's grown old, and when she dies, someone else picks up the thread. Mainstream historical fact, ancient Egyptian belief held that as long as your name was remembered, your soul, your Ba could continue to exist in some form. Tomb texts and funerary practices often included phrases like, "May your name live forever," reflecting a desire for eternal presence, not just in the afterlife, but in the thoughts of the living. There's a peace in that. You don't need statues or pyramids or scrolls. Your story has turned into something better, a ripple, a habit, a soft echo that tucks into daily life and refuses to vanish. You listen to it sometimes. When the air goes still, when someone lights a candle and says your name, when a new hand picks up a reed pen and begins to draw, there you are. Not haunting, not watching, just being. You remember the tree, it's still growing, still throwing shade in the heat, still catching the breeze like a dancer with long, wild arms. Underneath it, a girl, another girl not yours, not the last, is curled up with a tablet and a stylus. She's sketching something. You lean closer. It's a bird, wings outstretched, tail a little off-center, beak proudly crooked. The lines are messy, the proportions are off, but the love, that's perfect. Quirky tidbit. Some modern-day archaeologists studying Egypt's past have unearthed children's doodles alongside more formal inscriptions. Tiny sketches of animals, scribbled names, even jokes, etched into pottery shards like kids, whispering through time, reminding us that history isn't all ceremony. Sometimes it's just a kid drawing a bird for someone they love. And that's it, isn't it? You're not a queen anymore, not a ruler, not a legend. You're a story, a memory carried forward by a clay bird, a crooked smile, a name that won't stay buried. Historians still argue whether memory is stronger than time, whether people endure through facts
or feelings, whether love, quiet, inconvenient, rebellious love can outlast the marble statues and gold-plated tombs that crumble with every passing century. But here, now beneath this vast linen sky, and above the humming river of memory, you already know. Yes, it does. It has. It will. Always. And so, as the light fades and the clay bird finally finds its rest, you settle deeper into your blanket, the one that smells a little like lavender, a little like time. The hum of the fan in the corner sounds like distant wind, the sort that stirs the trees in a forgotten courtyard. There's nothing more to chase now. No legacy to grasp, no throne to defend. Just breath, just stillness, just the soft rhythm of memory unfurling like a scroll you never have to finish. The stars above your bed blink slowly, like old friends keeping watch. You're not alone. Not really. Somewhere, someone is still telling your story, even if they don't know it. Every act of kindness, every whispered name, every laugh at a joke older than the pyramids, it all echoes back, softly, gently, endlessly. Let your shoulders drop now. Let your mind drift. The clay bird is safe. The chamber is warm, and the story has been told just the way it needed to be. No rush, no worry, just rest. You did enough. You were enough. You are enough. Sleep well.